Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The White House is accelerating the government-wide transition to post-quantum cryptography. In a new executive order, President Trump directs agencies to meet hard deadlines for adopting the PQC algorithms that will protect data from a future quantum computer. For more, Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday joins me now. Justin, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you, Terry.
This EO is generating a lot of buzz, but for people who don't speak quantum, put it in plain English for us. What are the highlights from the executive order?
Sure. So this executive order directs agencies to really ramp up this transition to post-quantum cryptographic algorithms. And, cryptography protects data using math and algorithms and scrambling codes so that if that data is stolen by a bad actor, it can't be viewed. And so what this executive order is doing is focusing on the post-quantum cryptographic algorithms that the National Institute of Standards and Technology has already finalized, actually, within the last few years, even though a cryptographically relevant quantum computer, one that could break current encryption standards, isn't known to exist, but it's coming from all accounts, and it could be coming faster than people realize. And so what this executive order does is it sets a couple big deadlines for agencies to transition to those post-quantum cryptography algorithms for their really important systems that hold really sensitive data. It's December 31st, 2030 for implementing those keys on those systems, and then it's December 31st, 2031, a year later, for the digital signatures that protect things like emails. So those are the two deadlines that agencies now have to move to post-quantum cryptography for the systems that hold that sensitive data that they would really not want a bad actor, an adversary, to get a hold of and unscramble if they do develop a quantum computer here in the next few years. I spoke with Garfield Jones. He was the head of strategic technology at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency for several years. He now works at the quantum security firm Q-Secure. And he said that this executive order has really ramped up what was previously kind of just a planning exercise for federal agencies.
It really lights a fire under everyone to, hey, this is something that the government's taking seriously. Instead of people saying, oh, no, I'm not worried about it, it drops it right in the CIO's lap, like, hey, I've got to get this ready. It's not, this is not for somebody else's tenure for 10 years from now. It is my tenure now that I have to get this done.
Justin, does the EO explain who has the responsibility to lead this transition and guide agencies who may not know exactly what a transition to PQC means?
Yeah, so the Office of Management and Budget is going to take the lead on some new guidance to really detail how agencies should get this done. And that guidance is due within the next 90 days from OMB. So something to watch here this summer. And then each agency is actually required now to name a PQC lead. And this is someone who will report to the agency CIO on meeting the deadlines in this executive order and meeting all of the OMB guidance that is to come. And then the other big thing to come out of this is that the National Institute of Standards and Technology is tasked under this executive order with starting a pilot project that lays out what it looks like to migrate to PQC, that shows what it looks like to migrate to post-quantum cryptography. That pilot should start within the next 180 days, so about 6 months, and it should be done by the end of 2027 per the executive order. So that's something that's going to come together here relatively quickly and could be a pathfinder for the federal government.
Does the EO say anything about what contractors will be responsible for?
Yeah, this is a big deal. It actually directs OMB, NASA, and the General Services Administration to lead an effort to identify cost-saving opportunities in implementing the PQC migration strategy. And so those are the lead federal acquisition agencies, and they're going to look at things like cloud-based technologies, shared procurement of PQC tools, joint training programs, and centralized technical support. So that will all involve contractors. And then the order directs the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council to develop rules requiring contractors to meet federal information processing standards that include the PQC requirements here by the end of 2030. And so they're kind of working on that same deadline as federal agencies to make sure that contractors that develop or service sensitive systems on behalf of the U.S. government or service sensitive data on behalf of the U.S. government are also protecting that data with post-quantum cryptography. And so that is definitely a rule that contractors should be watching out for here in the next year or two.
And this wasn't the only EO that came out. We have this PQC executive order, but there was a separate EO the president signed to advance quantum innovation. How did the two go together?
Yeah, it's interesting. The orders are seemingly pretty disparate, one focused on innovation and one on security, but of course, the innovation one directs the Energy Department to lead an effort to develop a quantum computer here in the next couple of years that could lead to scientific breakthroughs. And so advancing kind of the science of quantum computing is kind of the other side of the coin to advancing security. Darren Guccione, he's the chief executive and co-founder of Keeper Security, pointed out to me that, establishing this big national quantum computing effort will advance security. That executive order also expands counterintelligence protection for domestic quantum infrastructure, invests in workforce development. So those are all things that are going to kind of intersect with this much more narrow push around post-quantum cryptography.
And as OMB gets ready to lead this deployment and transition effort, what are some of the gaps in these EOs that they're going to have to solve?
Yeah, so EOs are so high level that the implementation details that comes out from OMB, those will be really key here. And there are a few issues. One is, of course, funding. This is going to cost some level of money. Several years ago, under the Biden administration, OMB put out an estimate that the transition to the PQC standards for just the civilian side of government would cost roughly $7.1 billion over 10 years. And that is not something that agencies have really budgeted for. Cybersecurity programs are focused on much more near-term threats, on existing standards and requirements and frameworks. Post-quantum standards are just starting to become the broader kind of cybersecurity playbook. And so budgeting for this is going to be one thing that, we'll have to look out for in both agency budget requests and in appropriations bills. And then the implementation details, how agencies do this is just not going to be straightforward. They're going to have to identify those most sensitive systems that hold really valuable data. They're going to have to sequence changes across those systems. Upgrading to post-quantum cryptography could potentially take those systems offline, and that could have cascading effects. And so this is going to be something that the agencies will have to work very closely and very carefully. And then finally, while this executive order focuses on high-value systems and assets, several folks pointed out that, agencies really need to focus on the specific data that they need to protect and what they need to prioritize here, because some data is only sensitive for a couple of years or, even less. But there's other data, plenty of data that the government holds that they will not want getting out there for 10, 20, even 50 years. And that's things like taxpayer data, of course, census data, and a whole range of other things. And so they'll have to figure out how to protect those data assets really closely and not focus on maybe the less sensitive stuff. I spoke with Garfield Jones about that as well.
Those longer life cycle data elements need to be moved maybe to a more secure area, or we need to put longer keys on them because we still haven't implemented the algorithms yet. So between now and 2030 and 2031, we still have all that data that's still moving out, that's still being harvested. So what are we going to do about that?
It's Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday. Justin, I really appreciate you giving us a first look at these critical EOs. There's still going to be lots to watch.
My pleasure.
You can find Justin's story at federalnewsnetwork.com.